Elias Vance built his empire on cybersecurity, securing the fortunes of powerful clients across the globe. But his greatest challenge wasn't a corporate hack. It was his own son-in-law, Victor Sterling. Driven by crippling debt and blind greed, Victor targeted Elias's secluded estate, convinced the old man kept a hidden vault of cash and gold. What Victor didn't realize was that Elias knew his intentions all along. The supposed robbery was in fact an elaborate, meticulously designed security exercise. Victor walked into a fortress of digital surveillance, prepared not to lose money, but to gather the irrefutable evidence needed to save his daughter, Sarah, from a life of inevitable betrayal. The house was not merely a residence. It was a fortress of my own design, a sprawling monument to Elias Vance's obsession with security and control. Built 20 years ago, long before my cybersecurity firm, Sentinel Solutions, became a household name among Fortune 500 companies, the estate was my first major project, a testament to the adage that you can't protect what you don't fully understand. It sat perched on 20 secluded acres, hidden behind a triple-layered perimeter of high walls, thermal cameras, and biometric gates that made Fort Knox look like a public library. But tonight, the complex, multi-million-dollar defense grid was largely irrelevant. The threat was inside the wire, inside the family, and the only protection needed was psychological. I sat in my study, the leather chair worn and perfectly molded to my frame, bathed in the low, amber glow of the desk lamp. It was just past 1 a.m. The silence was absolute, save for the faint hum of the server room 3 floors below. Every sensor in the house was green, reporting nothing. I didn't need sensors to know Victor Sterling was coming. Victor was not a criminal mastermind. He was simply a greedy, cornered animal. His attempts at entrepreneurship, a disastrous crypto mining venture followed by a failed chain of overpriced juice bars, had left him hundreds of thousands in debt. His desperation had been fermenting for months, slowly poisoning his personality until he could barely look me in the eye without shifting his gaze toward the West Wing. The West Wing. That was the key. In this house, every choice was deliberate. The master bedroom, where Victor believed the primary vault was located, had been deliberately placed in the West Wing, the least secure portion of the entire structure. I had allowed the rumor to spread, through careless dinner conversation and selective security theater, that I was an old-fashioned man who kept his most liquid wealth, cash, gold, bearer bonds, on premises, secured behind a heavy antique portrait. It was a comforting lie I had been cultivating for years, a necessary layer of misdirection for the eventual insider threat. My gaze drifted to the 3 concealed monitors built flush into the wall behind a pivoting section of shelving. They weren't displaying general security feeds. They showed a dedicated, pre-programmed scenario. Monitor 1, a schematic of the West Wing showing the meticulously positioned monofilament tripwires and the silent pressure plates leading to the safe room. Every traditional alarm in that section was intentionally off, replaced by specialized, silent recording devices. Monitor 2, the live feed from a high-resolution camera mounted in a chimney flue above the French doors. It showed the dark, moonlit patio, waiting. Monitor 3, a close-up of the master bedroom wall, where the infamous portrait hung, concealing the steel vault door. This wasn't a defensive posture, it was an offensive setup. Victor thought he was planning a smash-and-grab robbery. I knew I was about to conduct the most critical due diligence report of my life. The subject? My daughter's husband. The outcome? His immediate and permanent removal. My daughter, Sarah, was the sole reason for this entire exercise. She was kind, intelligent, and fiercely loyal, qualities Victor had exploited since their first date. She loved Victor blindingly. Her happiness was tied to his presence, even as his presence became a drain on her spirit and her bank account. A simple conversation, a quiet, rational sit-down where I outlined Victor's flaws, would only drive her further into his arms. I had to let Victor demonstrate his character to her irrevocably and undeniably. I had to let him catch himself in the net. The trap was built not to stop him, but to document him. I rose from the desk and walked to the reinforced window. The estate was silent, the kind of stillness that precedes violence. I checked the time on my wrist, 1:45 a.m. He would come soon. He had the opportunity. Sarah was attending a late, mandatory conference in the city, the perfect alibi he'd practically orchestrated himself. I reviewed my final checks. The safe room, empty, save for the pedestal, the attaché case, and the wall-sized display screen. The air vents were packed with sensitive microphones, and the light switches were rigged to a specialized console. The recording, I had spent hours editing the video footage and audio clips. Victor's web searches, his anxious, hushed phone calls to a known loan shark, his casual, dismissive comments about me to his accomplice, all were seamlessly stitched together into a 2-minute, damning presentation. The attaché case contents. Inside, the documents were crisp, new, and real. The power of attorney, already effective upon my retirement next week, the last will and testament, finalizing the transfer of 99% of my estate to Sarah, and the meticulously drafted divorce petition, signed by Sarah's divorce lawyer. This was the final bait, the clear evidence of the vast fortune Victor was about to throw away. The witness, Sarah, was my biggest variable. She believed she was driving back from the city conference tonight. She wasn't. I had her picked up by my head of security an hour ago and taken to the hidden viewing station in the kitchen, a room directly adjacent to the West Wing. She was watching the live surveillance feed from the moment Victor breached the perimeter. She was going to see it all, unfiltered and undeniable. The weight of this final action pressed down on me. I wasn't just catching a thief, I was shattering my daughter's marriage, deliberately inflicting a short-term pain to prevent a lifetime of misery and betrayal. It was the hardest thing I had ever prepared to do. I walked to the entrance of the study, which connected to the main hallway of the West Wing. Here, the electronic defenses ended. I had to rely on my own timing. I took a final, deep breath, tasting the sterile air of the expensive climate control system. The clock on the wall now read 2:15 a.m. I took my position near the hallway door, out of sight of the entry point, but with a clear view of the monitors in my study. I wasn't armed. I didn't need a weapon. My weapon was the truth, and my ammunition was the meticulous digital record of Victor's own choices. A small icon on monitor 1, the schematic, flickered red. The external thermal camera had just detected human body heat less than 30 feet from the French doors. Showtime, I thought, settling my gaze on the monitor. The silence was now gone, replaced by the faint, rushing sound of my own adrenaline. The robbery was about to begin, and the only man who knew the true contents of the safe was the thief's mark. Victor was about to find out that when you try to rob a cybersecurity expert, you don't just find cash, you find yourself. The cold, wet grass of the West Lawn clung to Victor's cheap black cargo pants, soaking him through instantly. He didn't notice. Every neuron in his body was screaming a mix of terror and avarice. He was 37 years old, a man whose life had become a series of catastrophic ventures, and this single, desperate action, this final, irrevocable gamble, was meant to wipe the slate clean. He was focused entirely on the French doors. They were the weakest point, a structural vulnerability I had designed into the house as a visible weakness. Victor had watched me use those doors, had seen me casually lock them with a standard, albeit expensive, ornamental latch. He believed the real security was elsewhere. He produced a small, silver laser cutter, rented under a complicated series of untraceable transactions. The device hissed, emitting a thin, intense crimson beam that looked utterly theatrical in the deep shadows. He worked at the lock for 4 minutes, a clumsy, nervous dance that would have set off a dozen alarms in any other house. Here, the specialized microphones picked up the distinct zing of the cutting wire and the faint pop as the latch assembly finally gave way. Victor gently slid the door open a few inches, pausing, sweat beading under the ski mask. He listened intently. Nothing. The digital fortress was silent. This confirmed his belief. Elias Vance was a sound sleeper. He slipped inside. The difference in temperature between the humid night air and the chilled, stale air of the foyer was a physical shock. He moved with an exaggerated, back-breaking crouch, a movement straight out of a mediocre heist movie. He was entirely unaware that he had just stepped over a barely visible monofilament thread, triggering a silent alert in my study. The green light on monitor 1 instantly flashed red, confirming breach, Zone West 1. He moved through the west foyer, his footsteps heavy and uneven on the marble floor. He was aiming for the master bedroom, the chamber of secrets, the repository of the Vance fortune. He had been planning this route for months, mentally mapping the distance from the door to the portrait, timing his movements based on my predictable bedtime routine. As Victor crossed the threshold into the master suite, everything he thought he knew about the plan shattered. He had braced himself for blinding lights, blaring sirens, perhaps a remote command demanding he freeze. Instead, the room remained shrouded in deep, suffocating darkness. Only the weak, distant ambient light from the moon struggling through the heavy curtains gave the room any shape. Then the voice. It wasn't a siren. It wasn't a synthesized security warning. It was my voice, Elias Vance's voice, low, calm, and utterly devoid of panic. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, resonating from the expensive, custom-built ceiling tiles, making the air around him vibrate. "Hello, Victor. I knew you'd come for the gold." Victor stopped dead. The sound was like a physical punch to the gut. His nervous system, already running on pure cortisol, seized up. He spun around, a black blur of panic, his mind scrambling to process the impossible scenario. The laser cutter, still hot, slipped from his numb fingers and clattered onto the thick carpet. "Who's there? Show yourself." Victor hissed into the oppressive darkness, his voice raw with fear, muffled by the cheap fabric of the ski mask. He fumbled frantically for the small, heavy-duty crowbar he'd taped to his leg. "My voice. I am here, Victor. More present than you could possibly imagine. And the gold is not going to run away. You've come all this way. No need for hysterics." The unnerving calmness of the disembodied voice was far worse than any alarm. It stripped him of the illusion of control, the comfort of anonymity, and the basic premise of his plan, that this would be a simple theft from an unaware old man. Victor's hands were shaking violently as he brought up his cheap, consumer-grade flashlight. The beam was weak and jittery, slicing through the deep shadows. He swept the beam across the walls, the ceiling, the furniture, desperate to locate the source of the voice, convinced I was hiding somewhere in the vast bedroom suite. He saw only expensive fabrics, custom cabinetry, and the crushing emptiness of a room designed for 2, currently occupied by 1 terrified thief. My voice. I am not in the room, Victor. I am merely observing. And recording. Now, stop wasting time. The police are not on their way, yet. I wanted to have this conversation first. Continue to the portrait. The fact that I was not panicking, that I seemed to be orchestrating his movements like a video game character, was the most terrifying realization. Victor, breathing in ragged, loud gasps, realized he wasn't robbing an old man. He was operating within the structure of a trap meticulously prepared by a cybersecurity expert. He had walked into a controlled environment where every variable, including his fear, was calculated. But desperation, the burning need to clear his debts, to salvage his disastrous life, was a more potent fuel than fear. He believed the voice was coming from a hidden camera system. He believed I was watching from a distant bunker. And if I was watching, it meant the reward was still here. I wouldn't go to all this trouble if the safe was empty. Driven by this twisted logic, Victor moved toward the wall, located the large, ugly landscape portrait, and with a guttural grunt, ripped it violently from the wall, tearing the canvas slightly. The reward for his courage was the sight of the safe, not a bolted-in cash box, but a high-tech, stainless steel vault door, designed by a German firm I'd bought out 5 years ago. It had a dazzling, sophisticated array of security features: a numeric keypad, a bioscanner, and a polished chrome handle. It whispered of immense, untraceable wealth. Victor felt a rush of adrenaline. The reward is here. The old man is just playing games. He ran his gloved hand over the steel, searching frantically for a hidden release or a weakness. He found the elaborate digital touchscreen panel and began smashing his fingers against it, inputting a random, panicked 12-digit number. The panel instantly flashed red, accompanied by a loud, synthetic, buzzing error sound. My voice: "Don't bother, Victor." That combination is only known by my former CFO and a lawyer in Zurich. It's not 12 numbers. It's an algorithm generated by the time difference between your last 2 bank withdrawals, converted to hexadecimal. A number, I'm afraid, only my banking system and my internal security AI know. Victor's panic spiraled into near hysteria. He had been so close, but the voice offered a lifeline, a hint designed to redirect his failing courage. My voice: "The code is not on the keypad, Victor. The biometric scanner is a red herring. The code is right there. Look around. I don't hide things in plain sight. I hide the mechanism in plain sight." Victor swept his flashlight over the wall again, his desperate eyes searching for anything that looked like a hidden switch. His mind, frayed by debt and fear, was hyper-focused on solving the puzzle. He ran his hand across the wall near the door frame and found it. A small, almost invisible, unlabeled push button camouflaged perfectly into the steel frame. He pressed it with shaking certainty. The metallic hiss was deafening. The vault door, heavy, thick, and undeniably real, retracted into the wall with a complex, satisfying clunk, revealing a small, brightly lit inner chamber. The gold was within his grasp. He didn't hesitate. He plunged into the light, leaving the darkness of the master suite and the booming disembodied voice behind him, convinced he had outsmarted his mark. He was entirely unaware that he had just entered the heart of my recording studio. Victor burst into the safe room, the white, clinical light momentarily blinding him after the consuming darkness of the master suite. The air was dry and cool, faintly smelling of ozone and new electronics. His entire focus was fixed on the center of the floor, where the prize must surely be. The room was indeed small, but the reality was a devastating blow to his expectation. There were no stacks of cash, no shimmering piles of gold, no trays overflowing with diamonds. The room was pristine, completely empty, save for 2 distinct objects that instantly grabbed his attention. In the dead center of the polished, metallic floor stood a minimalist white pedestal. Resting on it was a single, sleek, black attaché case. It looked expensive, heavy, and was secured with a high-end, 3-dial combination lock. The entire far wall was dominated by a colossal, seamless digital display screen. It was currently displaying a static, high-resolution image, an ornate, almost medieval-looking key. Victor's heart, which had just begun to soar with the rush of successful entry, plummeted. He ignored the screen and lunged for the attaché case. It has to be in here. The bonds, the keys to the crypto wallets, the cash, he desperately reasoned. He knelt, his gloved hands fumbling at the 3 dials of the combination lock. He tried the number he remembered me muttering once, then his own birthday, then Sarah's anniversary. The lock remained stubbornly fixed. My voice, still calm, still omnipresent, and now closer, clearer, as if delivered through studio-quality speakers surrounding him, returned, "The key you seek is not mechanical, Victor. It's chronological. It's a date you should never have forgotten. And why are you trying to pry it open? Do you intend to damage my daughter's property?" Victor recoiled as if struck. "Your daughter's property? What are you talking about, Vance?" He spat, his voice strained and hoarse. He had forgotten to use the ski mask's filtering microphone, and the sound was raw. "My voice. The case, Victor. I am merely the custodian of the contents. The combination is 5051992. May 5, 1992. My Sarah's birthday." The revelation that I had secured the most crucial point of access with my daughter's birth date was a psychological jab. It confirmed the intense, personal nature of this encounter. Victor felt a fresh wave of nausea but quickly input the numbers. 5051992. The lock clicked with a clean, definitive sound. He flung the lid open, tearing at the expensive lining. His eyes searched frantically for the telltale green of U.S. currency or the dull sheen of gold. What he found was a thick stack of legal documents and a single, sealed white envelope addressed to him. "This is impossible. Where is the money, Vance?" he screamed, grabbing the envelope. My voice. "Patience, Victor. The contents of that case are worth more than any stack of cash. They represent the truth." Victor ripped open the envelope and unfolded the letter inside, holding it up to the harsh white light. The opening lines were concise, devastating. "Victor, if you are reading this, it means you have confirmed every fear I've ever had about your character. You broke into my house, my sanctuary, to steal money from the man who gave his daughter away to you. You couldn't wait 3 more days. Now look up. The gold isn't in the case. 3 more days?" Victor muttered, his eyes wide. "My retirement date. The date I had told him and Sarah I would finalize the transfer of the main trust." He looked up at the wall-size screen. The static image of the key vanished, replaced by a looping, high-definition video feed. The video was a professionally edited montage, backed by no music, only the sharp, clear audio of his own voice. The montage of Betrayal. A grainy, nighttime thermal image. Victor standing in a rental parking lot, receiving the laser cutter from a shady contact. His voice clear as a bell. "This old man thinks he's a genius. He won't even hear me." A screenshot of a computer monitor, his web browser history, clearly showing searches for "how to silent cut steel lock," "loan shark payment extension," and chillingly, "safe behind painting location." A zoomed-in audio clip from a car interior, Victor talking on his hands-free system just 3 days prior. His voice, laced with contempt. "The old man sitting on hundreds of thousands of cash. Sarah thinks he's just thrifty. If I wait for the inheritance, the loan sharks will break my legs. I need this now." Footage from an earlier visit. Victor, 2 weeks prior, carefully measuring the height of the portrait and discreetly taking a photograph of the French door lock mechanism. The video was utterly devastating. It was incontrovertible proof that this was not a desperate, spur-of-the-moment act, but a calculated, contemptuous scheme. Victor staggered backward, tripping over his own feet. "This is illegal. This is wiretapping. You can't record me," he yelled at the screen, his face a mask of terror, the ski mask dangling forgotten around his neck. My voice. "Actually, Victor, it is completely legal. The system recorded you on my property, using my Wi-Fi to research my security system, and within the scope of my firm's proprietary internal testing protocols. Everything you see, you authorized when you physically breached my perimeter. You signed the implicit waiver when you accepted my dinner invitations for 3 years. I am a cybersecurity expert. I don't secure assets, I secure proof." He stared at the documents in his hands, realizing the true nature of the trap. He glanced back at the attaché case and finally saw the other documents. A fully executed power of attorney transferring immediate control of the Vance family trust to Sarah Vance Sterling. A notarized last will and testament leaving 99% of my entire estate, liquid assets, business shares, and this entire, ludicrously valuable property, to Sarah. The final, damning piece, a legal, binding divorce petition drafted by one of the state's most expensive family law attorneys. Victor, the thief, was standing inside a safe that contained not money, but the entire blueprint of his future, a future he had just irrevocably destroyed. "You were going to give it all to her," he whispered, the realization hitting him harder than any physical blow. "You are going to make us rich." And I. My voice. "Yes, Victor. I was retiring. You and Sarah would have woken up next week to a life without debt, without stress, a life I spent 40 years building for my daughter. But you couldn't trust her, and you certainly couldn't trust me. You chose this path." The lights in the safe room suddenly intensified, bathing the space in a harsh, cold white. The door to the vault, which had been retracted, hissed and began to slide back out, stopping halfway. Standing in the partial opening, framed by the steel and light, was me. I was wearing a silk robe and holding a steaming mug of black tea. I looked disappointed, but completely unruffled. "The case contains the truth, Victor. The ultimate, undeniable proof of your intentions. And now that you've seen it, you can make your final choice. I am no longer on a video loop. I'm right here." Victor staggered into the safe room, the small chamber bathed in a harsh, cold white light that magnified his confusion. His initial panic began to morph into furious, reckless greed. He was certain this was all a mind game, a test designed to delay him but ultimately prove the immense value of the contents. He ignored the large digital screen, focusing entirely on the black attaché case resting on the central white pedestal. This has to be it, he thought, the paper assets, the crypto key, the bearer bonds. Vance is just too paranoid to put it in a wall safe. He dropped to his knees, his flashlight clattering onto the floor, forgotten. His gloved hands fumbled desperately with the combination lock. He tried prying the edge with a fingernail, searching for a weak point. The case was solid, immovable. My voice sliced through the air, cool and mocking. "Don't bother, Victor. Force is for amateurs. And damaging this case would be quite a foolish move. It contains documentation, and destroying it would only hurt Sarah's future." "Where is the money, Vance?" Victor yelled, his voice raw. "I know it's here. Stop playing games." My voice. "The money isn't in there, Victor. But the documentation proves exactly how much money you're about to lose. And the combination, well, the combination is a date you should have memorized out of respect, if not love. 5051992. Victor froze. Sarah's birthday. The simple, obvious choice that his panicked mind had bypassed entirely. A fresh wave of disgust washed over him. Disgust at me for manipulating him, and disgust at himself for his tunnel vision. He quickly punched the numbers into the lock. The tumblers clicked with a precise, clean sound. He tore the attaché case open. The lid flew back, revealing not stacks of banded currency or bars of gold, but a meticulously organized stack of legal documents. Victor snatched the top document, a fully executed last will and testament, and began reading frantically, his flashlight beam illuminating the text. As his eyes tracked the figures and the name of the sole beneficiary, Sarah Vance Sterling, the reality of what he was doing, and what he was about to lose, began to dawn on him. He was not robbing a miser. He was sabotaging his inheritance. He had broken into the house 3 days before he was due to become a millionaire by marriage. He threw the will down and grabbed a sealed envelope addressed directly to him. The paper was heavy, the seal embossed. He ripped it open, his terror escalating as he realized this entire scenario was tailored, directed, and personalized. He was no longer an anonymous thief. He was the star of my private show. Victor's hands, slick with cold sweat, trembled as he held the letter. The initial adrenaline of the break-in had curdled into a paralyzing fear. He was no longer just a thief. He was a desperate protagonist in a nightmare orchestrated by the man he sought to rob. The entire room, gleaming and sterile, felt like a high-tech interrogation chamber. He quickly scanned the text of the personal letter, my voice, both the live, booming echo and the silent, written words, searing into his mind. If you are reading this, it means you have confirmed every fear I've ever had about your character. You broke into my house, my sanctuary, to steal money from the man who gave his daughter away to you. You couldn't wait 3 more days. Now look up. The gold isn't in the case. The wealth you seek is secured by integrity, not steel. 3 more days, he whispered, the phrase hitting him with the force of a wrecking ball. My planned retirement date. The day the news would have broken that Sarah was about to become one of the wealthiest women in the state, making him, by extension, financially indestructible. His avarice, his lack of patience, had driven him to commit a felony for a fortune he was already set to inherit. He crumpled the letter and finally obeyed the final, ominous instruction. He looked up at the entire far wall, which was dominated by the colossal, seamless digital display screen. The static image of the key vanished. The screen immediately filled with a high-resolution video montage, its quality sickeningly crisp. It was a chronological, damning presentation of Victor's actions, backed only by the cold, clear audio of his own voice and a precise timeline running along the bottom. The display wasn't surveillance, it was a character assassination delivered via cinema-grade production. Clip 1. The research, 3 weeks ago. A screenshot of Victor's personal laptop screen, the browser history magnified and highlighted in bright yellow. Searches included, how to defeat motion sensors, safes behind painting's rumor, and more specifically, Elias Vance vault location. The screen then cut to a brief video of Victor, late at night in his own kitchen, talking softly into his phone. Victor's voice, recorded via his own phone's microphone, now played back clearly, the old man sitting on hundreds of thousands in cash and gold. The safe is the weak link. Sarah thinks he's just thrifty, but I know better. This is the only way to clear the whole mess before the sharks come calling. Clip 2. The acquisition, 10 days ago. A grainy, but perfectly clear, thermal image taken from a remote parking lot camera. Victor, dressed in a baseball cap and dark coat, exchanging a large wad of cash for a silver tool case, the laser cutter. Victor's voice, recorded via a discreet microphone planted in his car's headrest. It cost a fortune, but it's silent. I'll be in and out before he even dreams of waking up. Once the debt is clear, we can pretend this never happened. Clip 3. The contempt. 1 week ago. An audio clip recorded during a private phone call between Victor and an acquaintance about a minor business transaction. Victor was overheard discussing my upcoming retirement party. Victor's voice, laced with contempt and dismissiveness. The old fool is handing over the keys to his kingdom next week. I'll humor him at the party, of course, pretend to be grateful. But honestly, the guy is so predictable, it's pathetic. He's lived in his own bubble for too long. He won't see this coming. Clip 4. The infiltration. Live footage. The screen shifted to a multi-window display showing the last hour. Victor cutting the lock on the French doors. Victor stumbling over the monofilament thread. Victor dropping the crowbar. Victor screaming, "Where is the money?" seconds ago. Every movement, every panicked breath, was documented and time-stamped with undeniable clarity. Victor didn't just see proof of his crime. He saw proof of my meticulous, absolute knowledge of his character. I hadn't been asleep. I had been researching him more thoroughly than his own credit agency. I had allowed him to walk through every step of the felony to create the most devastating, unassailable piece of evidence imaginable. The collapse of anonymity. Victor staggered backward, his terror now compounded by the profound realization of his own foolishness. He had challenged a cybersecurity genius on his own turf, using amateur tactics. "This is illegal. This is a violation of my rights," he stammered, his voice pathetic and hollow. "Wiretapping. You can't use this." My voice, not through the speakers now, but live, delivered with icy precision as I stepped fully into the safe room doorway, cut him off. "Actually, Victor, it is all perfectly legal. This is proprietary internal testing footage on a privately secured asset. You authorized everything when you physically breached the perimeter and accepted the terms of the private security system. You, in your infinite wisdom, entered a private server room and provided all the evidence necessary for your own prosecution. I was dressed in a simple, dark silk robe, looking completely at ease. I held a large, steaming mug of tea. The sheer calmness of my demeanor was a terrifying contrast to his state of absolute panic. "You are a thief, Victor. And you are a fool," I stated, walking slowly toward the pedestal. I lifted the attaché case and gently placed it back on the floor. "But you've only seen half the evidence." I gestured to the open case, where the legal documents lay exposed. "The digital proof on the screen locks you up for a decade. The paper proof in this case explains exactly what you threw away for a chance at a petty, immediate score." Victor snatched the remaining documents from the case, his eyes bloodshot, reading the headlines. "The fully executed power of attorney, POA. The notarized last will and testament. The fully drafted divorce petition." He looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time. "You were going to make us rich. You had already signed the papers." "I was going to make Sarah rich," I corrected him, my voice flat. "And by extension, you would have benefited immensely. You would have had a life of ease, respect, and zero debt. But you couldn't wait 3 days. You couldn't trust my love for my daughter. You decided to steal before you had even inherited the privilege of being her husband." I picked up the mug of tea and took a slow sip, letting the utter finality of the statement hang in the sterile air. The trap wasn't the safe, the trap was the evidence. Victor had walked in believing he would find gold. He found the documented, irrefutable ruin of his life. The cold, precise silence of the safe room was utterly broken by the appearance of the one person Victor had been most careful to mislead, Sarah. She stood in the partially open vault doorway, framed by the stark white light, a ghost of her usual vibrant self. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face sheet-white, and the cheap crowbar Victor had dropped earlier lay inertly clutched in her trembling hand, a useless weapon, a symbol of her dashed defense. I had walked her through the entire ordeal in the adjoining kitchen, showing her the real-time feeds and the full, unedited audio of her husband's contempt and treachery. Victor, ripping the ski mask from his head, stumbled backward, his hands held up in a futile gesture of defense. Sarah. Honey. It's not what it looks like. I was trying to get the money to save us. The loan sharks were. Sarah cut him off, her voice a low, raw rasp of agony and betrayal. Save us? You talked about my father like he was nothing. You called him an old fool. You used my birthday to open the case. You were planning to take the money and leave me with your debt, weren't you? She knew the answer. The video had been clear. I stepped back, moving toward the edge of the safe room, allowing the devastation to unfold between them. This was the final unscripted act of the night, the moment Victor would choose his fate based on the evidence I had so painstakingly accumulated. The choice is simple, Victor, I stated, my voice now loud and commanding, cutting through the emotional chaos. I had moved beyond mere disappointment. I was delivering an irrevocable judgment. I pointed toward the closed attaché case containing the documents. In that case are two possible futures. One is Sarah's future, a life of financial freedom, safety, and happiness, thanks to the power of attorney and will you've already seen. The other future, I continued, pointing a finger directly at his chest, is yours. And that depends entirely on your next 5 minutes. Victor looked wild-eyed, trapped between the unforgiving steel walls and the devastating heartbreak in his wife's eyes. The police are not here, I confirmed, but my chief counsel, Mr. Henderson, has the complete, unedited file of this entire attempted felony, the thermal breach, the wiretapped audio, the video confession, all uploaded to a secure, remote server. A single tap on my phone sends it instantly to the district attorney's office. You will be facing federal wiretapping charges, attempted felony breaking and entering, and conspiracy to commit theft. Given your desperate financial state and the irrefutable evidence, you will go to prison for a very long time, and you will emerge penniless and permanently barred from ever seeing Sarah again. I paused, letting the weight of the prison term settle on him. That is option 1, maximum loss, maximum penalty. I walked over to the attaché case, opened it again, and pointed at the bottom document. It was the expensive, clean, fully drafted divorce petition. Option 2, immediate withdrawal. You sign that document right now. You sign the full confession of guilt to your lawyer, ensuring you make no future claim against Sarah or my estate, ever. You walk out of my house, you walk out of my daughter's life, and you leave everything you came for, and everything you almost inherited, behind. You will be penniless, but you will be free from the legal consequences of this night. I will delete every digital record of your attempted crime, and the only person who will know this ever happened is Sarah. I looked at Sarah, who was silently weeping, the image of his betrayal burned forever into her memory. The marriage is over, Victor. You determined that when you decided to steal from me. The question is whether you want to pay for this crime with decades of your life, or simply with your future inheritance. Victor looked from the pristine divorce papers to the screen that had documented his every move. He saw the cold, hard logic of my trap. I hadn't wanted his money, I had wanted his undeniable guilt. I wanted the certainty of my daughter's safe separation. He let out a defeated, guttural cry that was more the sound of a trapped animal than a man. The papers. Give me the pen. I provided him with a simple, silver fountain pen. He snatched the divorce petition and the prepared confession of guilt, a document detailing his motivations and the extent of his planning, and signed them both with a frantic, desperate scribble, using the attaché case as a makeshift table. He signed away his marriage, his future, and the vast fortune that was almost his. It's done, he gasped, throwing the signed papers back into the case. Now delete it. Delete the file, Vance. I didn't reach for my phone immediately. I looked at Sarah, seeking her final confirmation. She didn't speak. She simply gave a small, barely perceptible nod. Consider it done, Victor, I said, my thumb hovering over the dedicated button on the key fob I held in my hand. The file is deleted. The recording ceases. I stood aside, a silent guard at the exit. Now leave. Walk out the French doors. Don't look back and don't contact my daughter ever again. If you violate this agreement, the backup files Henderson holds will be immediately released and your life will be over. Victor didn't need to be told twice. He fled the safe room, running through the master bedroom, past the spot where he had dropped the crowbar, and out the still-open French doors. He disappeared into the darkness of the West Lawn, leaving behind only the cheap ski mask, his expensive tools, and a lifetime of shattered trust. The silence that followed was heavy and real, unlike the calculated silence of the night. Sarah dropped the crowbar and collapsed into a chair, the tears finally coming in wrenching sobs. I walked over, pulled up a chair, and simply sat with her in the cold, bright, safe room. I didn't try to comfort her with words, which felt hollow. I just held her hand, my presence a solid, unmoving rock in the ruins of her marriage. He was going to leave me, she whispered, her voice choked. He didn't care about the family. He only cared about the money. He cared about money, Sarah, I confirmed gently. And he would have used you until you had nothing left. I had to know what he was willing to do. I had to let him show you, because no words from me could have ever convinced you of this truth. I pointed to the open attaché case, now holding the signed, conclusive divorce papers. Look at the rest of it, honey. The power of attorney is effective immediately. The trust is yours. The house is yours. You are free. This failed robbery was the most important security check I've ever run. It failed to steal a penny, but it successfully saved your life. She nodded slowly, her hand tightening around mine. The safe room, which Victor had expected to yield a fortune, had yielded only a painful, necessary truth. The true treasure was not the gold he sought, but the irrefutable evidence I had preserved. The whole painful ordeal, orchestrated from the setup to the choice, was the greatest gift a father could ever give, the certain knowledge of who to keep and, more crucially, who to cast aside. The fortress was safe, the family was whole, and the thief had banished himself. The price of the divorce, a life of wealth and peace for my daughter, was the cheapest victory I had ever bought. The vault door sealed on Victor Sterling's criminal ambitions and his failed marriage. He entered Elias Vance's home seeking gold and wealth. He left with only the signed papers that condemned his character and secured his divorce. The robbery was a catastrophic failure, but for Elias, it was the ultimate, calculated success. The massive fortune he intended to pass on to his daughter remained secure, and more importantly, the painful, undeniable truth of Victor's treachery was revealed. In the end, Elias didn't need a gun to defend his home. He needed the digital proof that set his daughter free. The safe room yielded no cash, but it delivered the priceless gift of permanent peace.